Well, howdy there, guys. This is your host, ID Jester. Let's talk some hockey. Specifically, let's talk about card and dice hockey. And basically, what this video is going to be is we're going to be talking about card and dice hockey, the problems associated with trying to simulate hockey, and we're going to talk about my matchup hockey game that I've had several times in this channel so far. It's gone through lots of revisions and updates and trying different things. I've been working on this project for 6 years now, so really been inspired by my good friend out there, Beecher Bums Gaming. So big shout out to him. He is currently working on a big project himself, and it's got me inspired to rethink and redo my card and dice hockey game. Uh, Beecher Bums Gaming, let's bring this in so you guys can see. He's a great sports simmer, great YouTuber, and just a great guy all the way around. But he's been creating Glory Days Boxing. And I'm not a huge boxing fan. I used to like it back in the day. But I'll tell you what, Glory Days Boxing is so good. It's got me back into boxing. I've been watching boxing videos. I've been checking out different things. And the game is really, really good. And just watching him going through the steps and the process he's been using and talking about how he set it up and his thoughts on boxing and the additions he's made to it and everything has really inspired me to get once again motivated to get my card and dice hockey game out there. So definitely check him out. He's on YouTube, Bleacher Bums Gaming. You see, he does lots of sports. He does a lot of baseball, soccer, racing, you name it, it's on his channel, and he does a really good job. So big shout out to him for inspiring me once again. So as I said, we're going to be talking about hockey. We're going to be talking about my feelings. So this is all my feelings and my thoughts and everything. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys out there and really hear what your feedback is on things. If you've ever tried to create something yourself, you don't realize how much work goes into it. I can go back and show you some old files that I had, and this thing, my matchup hockey game, has gone through quite a bit of revisions and stuff. And the reason for that is, in my personal feeling, again, this is all my personal feeling. You can disagree with me, that's fine. You can tell me I'm wrong, that's fine. Everyone has their own thoughts and views on things, and I think hockey, of all the sports, is the hardest game to simulate with cards and dice. There's a lot of reasons for that. If you look at sports simmers in general, if we take sports simmers in general, I would say 90 to 95% of them nowadays are solo. They don't have face-to-face people to sit down and play with. I'm sure some people still out there do, but most of the sports simmers out there are solo, and they're going to be having to manage both teams. They're going to have to make all the adjustments for both teams. They're going to have to keep track of all the information themselves. They're going to have to do it all themselves. And that's where I think hockey, of all the games out there, separates themselves from all the other sports. And if you look out there and you try to find any good card and dice games out there for hockey specifically, um, there's not hockey isn't well represented by cards and dice because I think number one, it's very, very, very hard to come up with a good format, and um, and number two, it's just not as mainstream, I guess, as a lot of the other sports out there. Kind of your main card and dice games are football and, of course, baseball. I think there's a lot of baseball sims out there. Again, my personal feeling, because baseball is, for me, I would think it would be the easiest to represent because you got a one-on-one matchup, pitcher batter, and you can get an outcome from them. Then you can go to the next batter, etc. and you're not having to simulate what hockey does. And what I mean by that is hockey for me is more of a flow type game where you should see you should see the ebb and flows of a game, even through the different period. You should see the ebb and flow of a game, and you run into problems when you try to do that because you can take a game that's 60 minutes long, and if somebody's going to card and dice and sim it, and they can watch a hockey game in 3 hours, but it takes them 4 hours to card and dice it, it's going to be very difficult for them to want to sit down and spend all that time. And the problems you run into is with cards and dice. If you have a player card and you have, now let's see here. Well, you're going to have 12 cards on the table at any time. You're going to have, your 5 offensive players in your goalie card, and you're going to have your defensive 5 cards in your goalie card. And hockey, unlike every other sport out there, is, like I said, an ebb and flow type game, and players coming in and out off the ice constantly. And if you're going to have to rotate cards, taking one line out, flipping the card to the next card, that all takes time for the sports simmer out there. And if you're doing that every 40 seconds of gameplay or minute of gameplay, you're talking about half the time the player is actually playing, all they're doing is flipping cards. The other problem is the more, how do I put this? The more complex you make the game, the harder it is for the sports simmer to actually go through the game and play it. Because if I've got to look at one player's card and get a result, but I have to check another player's card, or I have to check all the defensive player cards to find out if they've got, X results on it, add all those up, and then look up a bunch of charts. That one play that I'm simulating can take a minute or two. And when you're talking about, 200 plays that happen during a hockey game, or 180 plays, or how many plays you're representing there, all that's going to take a lot of time. Again, 180 plays, figure it's going to take a minute or so. You're talking 3-4 hours to sim a game, and a lot of sports simmers out there are not going to want to do that. So hockey has a lot of challenges to try and create a decent flow that's easy for the players to manage. And I'm giving you all this up front, so when I start talking about and I start showing my version of the hockey game, you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Of course, if you can simulate it on the computer and you have your cards and dice and that, it would obviously be a lot faster. But a lot of sports simmers out there, they don't want to use a computer program. They want to have the cards and the dice in their hands. So you have to think about it for both ways if you want it to be a mainstream or successful version of cards and dice. Specifically, we're talking about hockey, of course. If you want it to be usable by sports simmers out there, and if you want them to be energized and excited about your version of hockey, it has to be manageable. And it has to be, in my feeling, there are some versions out there of different sports sim hockey games that have cards and dice, and there are versions that are very, very easy. And is you just look at the player card, you roll the dice, you look at the result on the card, and you find out what happens, and then it might be a pass to a different player. You would pick up their card, roll the dice, And I don't think that really represents, and again, this is my personal feeling, this is nothing against any version of hockey out there, okay? This is nothing against any different person that puts out any effort or trouble to try and create a sports sim for hockey at all. This is just me and my views and my feelings about it. There are also cards and dice, and I've purchased some of these from online, and I've been looking, and I figured there's no sense in me trying to recreate the wheel if it's already been made. So I've looked at every, because I'm a big hockey fan. If you don't know, my personal feelings is playoff hockey for me is the number one sport ever. It even beats baseball. I would go playoff hockey would be number one for me. Then playoff baseball would be number two for me. And then probably playoff football. And then if we just go regular season, it would be probably, and it's close, but I would think baseball beats hockey in the regular season for me because it's more consistent. You have it going on. You have your team playing just about every day, and you can keep more. Like I said, there's more of an ebb and flow to the baseball season. Hockey, you can have a game on Tuesday and you don't play again until like Saturday or Sunday, So that way there's like a 3 or 4 day break. So you're kind of waiting and sitting around, of course, because there's not as many games and stuff. That's why I think the playoff hockey is so much better because it's pretty much day on, day on, day off, and then day on, day on, day off, day on, day on. So you're pretty consistent there. So if we're talking about just regular season baseball, then hockey, then football. And then I would rate basketball below that, soccer, auto racing, everything else would be below that for me personally. So for me, I'm a big hockey fan, big, huge hockey fan. So I've been going through. I've been to create a game, and Beat Your Bums Gaming can attest to this, and creating it to be workable, manageable, to be what you had envisioned and everything, is a lot of work. It is a lot of work just to create one team with all the different stats and everything is a couple 4 to 6 hours worth of work, getting all the different stats and going through all the different the lines and figuring out the player's stats, what kind of ratings they should have, blah, 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 blah. So, you got, 30 teams, 31 teams now in hockey, and you multiply that by 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours, just on average, say three times 31 teams is like, what, that's 900 hours just to create one season file for hockey teams. Then you're not even talking about creating all the charts and all the stuff that has to go along with the game. Speaking of charts, let's talk about charts. So there's things that slow down sports simmers when they got cards and dice in their hand. And like I said, one of the things that slows it down is if I've got my players out on. I wish I had. You know what? Let's do this. Let's just bring this back in. If I got I'm just using baseball here. I've got date deleted. There we go. I'm just going to throw out some stuff I have here. Actually, I was deleting these because I don't need these files anymore. But so here's Alexander Ovechkin. And if I've got my Raji Davis, if I got, and of course I'm trying to show you this on the computer, but if I've got, in this case baseball, I've got I've got my player card here, and then I only need my batter card. Problem with hockey is we need to have, like I said, 12 cards out there at any given time. You're talking about a lot of space, and if I'm flipping through these cards, because I got 4 different offensive lines. I've got 3 different defensive pairs that I have to go through. Goalie cards, you don't need to worry about switching because you're not going to switch a goalie except for, extreme situations. Maybe it's your team's down 5-0 or something. You want to switch goalie. So, I mean, that doesn't have very much. But like I said, if you're doing that every minute or every couple minutes, you're having to flip through cards. You're running into a lot of wasted, what I consider wasted time. You're talking about flipping, here's Alvander Ovechkin. If I got to switch to the next line, then all of a sudden I get that card, slide it out, put it back in, blah blah blah. Of course, there's kind of ways to get around that, or if you lay them all out on the table, you lay all your different lines out on the table, then you're talking about having 20, 40, you're going to have 42 cards on the table, all spread out. And so now when you roll the dice, you got to try and remember, am I on line 1? Am I on line 2? Okay. The other things this on Sports Simmers is when they have to check, and you can watch my baseball replays. When I get going and Raji Davis hits a single, boom, it's, 10 seconds the play is over. It's done. Great. All right. Problem-wise, and when, Raji Davis hits it into an error, then I got to go and I got to find the error chart. Okay. Then I got to roll on the error chart. And the error chart, I've got to compare the error result to one of the defensive players. So I got to go to their card. I got to get their error result. Then I have to compare that error result back to the chart. I've got to read the chart. I've got to find out what the outcome happened on the play. So instead of a roll and all of a sudden it is a single or a double or a home run or whatever it happens to be, all of a sudden it goes from a 20-second result up to maybe 2 minutes, a minute to 2 minutes. And then once you get base runners going, then you have to start talking about, your different stats with stealing and whether they go from first to second or first to third on a single. So you're going to have to, once again, you got to look up different results on the player cards. You got to look up those results on charts, and you got to try and compare and figure out, okay, well, what's kind of chance does he have of going from first to third instead of first to second? So the more complexity you have in the game, the more it can slow down the game, especially for a sports simmer who 90 to 95% is going to be doing this solo, and they don't have another person there to, okay, what's your, look up your card, find out what your run rating is, or find out what your error rating is on your shortstop, and you have somebody else helping you, which obviously will make the game go a little bit quicker. You got 2 people working on it, etc. And so that's another thing that can slow down a game. Even if you make the cards very simple, very, very simple. If there's a lot of charts that people need to look up, if we have error charts, we got a park chart, we have a home run chart, we have a run chart, we have a deep fly chart, we have a weird play chart, we have a injury chart, we have a close play chart, we have a bunt chart, we have, and I'm using baseball as an example here, but you kind of see where I'm going with this. If you have tons and tons of different charts and different things that players have to look up, you're talking about, once again, slowing the game down, because the sports simmer, they can't just roll. Raji Davis here, if it's he strikes out or it's an out, you go on to the next card and it's easy, boom, boom, boom. You can get flowing through the game. You got no problems. But if you got to stop to start looking up other player cards to see what stats they have, or if you're using tons and tons of different charts that players have to look up, that's also going to slow the game down. And especially with hockey, what we talked about in the beginning, I think hockey is more of an ebb and flow type game where you kind of want to see what's going on. The other thing with hockey is so much happens in such a short period of time. You can't just say, well, we're going to sim the first 2 minutes, roll the dice, and find out what happened, in my opinion. There is a card and dice version that kind of has something similar where you roll and a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes can just go by in a period like that. And if I'm rolling the dice one time and I'm 4 minutes a period or 2 minutes a period of time has gone by, I don't feel any flow to that. I don't know what's going on. I don't feel the action going on. But on the other side, if you're simming every 20 or 10 seconds, let's just say 20 seconds, and I'm using 20 seconds specifically because that's what I'm using is 20 seconds. If you're simming every 20 seconds of a hockey game, that's three every minute, and you have 20 minutes in a period, so 3 times 20 is 60. So you got to be able to sim 60 plays pretty darn quickly. If 60 plays take a minute, that's an hour per period. That's 3 hours for a complete game, not including overtime or shootouts or anything like that. Uh, you're going to be, your sports simmers are going to be like, I'm not spending 3 hours just to play one stinking game. Forget that. So, again, things that are going to slow things down for the person that's simming is if they got to look up a lot of charts, if they have to compare a lot of results, if they got to flip all the cards, if they got to do all this. So, again, complexity versus playability are two different things. The more complex the game is, uh, the more, okay, well, we've got a player card here, but I've got to check to see if the defensive team has 3 forecheckers out, and I have to find out if the left defenseman has a block rating stat, and we got to add in all of the skate values for all the defensive team players, and I've got to calculate all this up. Oh my God, you're talking about minutes for play, and that is not going to give you ebb and flow, and it's going to just, it's, for me personally, his sports simmers are going to be uh, turned off by that. So, again, hockey brings its challenges. So, I've been working so hard and diligently to try and find a way. I've had my original versions had cards and dice, and I played the cards and dice version. For me, it was great, but it took a long time. It took a super long time because, like I said, I got to flip through the cards. I've got to, uh, every minute I've got to flip through a different line. Um, and that just slows the game down. I don't get the ebb and flow. I'm a single sports simmer, so I don't have a friend. And so I'm looking for someone to help me, but there's no one there, so I got to do it all myself. I've got to calculate everything myself. I've got to figure it all out. All right, so there's the challenges, my thoughts about everything going into this. So now we're going to talk about why I did what I did. All right. So the first thing that I learned pretty easy going into this after I created my cards and dice was cards and dice just wasn't going to be the answer. Uh, there's just too much downtime where you're flipping cards to the next player, to the next player, to the next line, to the next line, the next line, the next line, the next line. And you're just wasting time because you got to do it for 10 players out there all the time. The only way around that is to have, like I said, 42, because each team has 20 players. I'm sorry, it would be 40, not 42. Each team has 40 players, or each team has 20 players, which is totals 40 players. So you're going to have 40 cards spread out on the table. You know how much room that takes up? And that's not really conducive to quick playing. Plus, you have all these cards out, which, then you got to try and remember which line you have out there. You got to try and figure out Um, you got to try and figure out, okay, well, I've got line 2 out there. Now I've got to look at the centerman. So now I got to try and find that card out of all the cards that are on the table. And that's, that takes up time as well. So to get around that, well, how are we going to get around that problem if we're going to be flipping through the cards all the time? Well, the way we're going to get around that problem for me, and this is now onto my stuff and my feelings about it, is we're actually going to have no cards. There are going to be no cards. All of your data, all your information is going to be on one. Why can't I find it? Where? Oh, it's already down here. That's why. It's already going to be on one sheet of paper. So you can see here, this is the Washington Capitals from 2016, 2017. If I actually go in and I go page preview, you can see if I printed this out, this would be on one sheet of paper. So instead of having cards, you're going to have all your cards, but they're just going to be miniaturized down to the size of, whatever this is, like 2.5 by 1.5 inches or whatever. So let's talk about that for a second. So what does that do? What does that not do for us? Well, number one, it doesn't give us a lot of room to have a ton of stats. You can see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 12 different stats on the player there. Then, of course, we have some information about their real season stats. So in this case, we're looking at Alexander Ovechkin here from the Capitals 2016-2017 season. And you can see he played 82 games. He had 33 goals. He had 36 assists. He had 69 points. And a bunch of other stats. You can also see that we have a centerman, right wing, left defenseman, right defenseman. You can see I used up just about as much space as I could. I do have some more room down here in the corner, which is blank, and down here in the corner, which is blank. And what you would have here is I've already set up. So this would be your number 1 line here for your offense and your number 1 defensive pairs. Number 2 line and your number 2 defensive pairs. Your number 3 line, your defensive pairs for number 3. Ignore the fact that the goalies are actually here. They're down here, but I moved them up here, and I'll explain why I did that afterwards. So just ignore that we have goalies here and here. I'll explain why later. Here's your number 4th pair. So if I was coming into a game, I would have these 20 players. There are their 20 cards right there. And if I had any players out with injuries, or I wanted to rest someone, or whatever the situation may be, your backups are going to be listed down below. So you have, a couple left wings, a couple centers, a couple right wings, a couple extra defensemen down here. Then you have your goalie cards, which should be located down here at the bottom. There's some open space over here, but for the open space, I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to. I'm going to basically talk about, I'm going to show, on power play, and then list which players should be in which positions on power play line number 1, on power play line number 2, shorthanded opportunity line 1, shorthanded opportunity number 2, or penalty kill. Shootout players that normally took this situation. That's why this area is blank, is for that information. And then down here in the bottom right hand corner, probably it's going to be listed like the Washington Capitals 2016 results, like how many, their coach name, what position they came in their division, if they made the playoffs, what round they made it to, and what the outcome was, kind of like their season result card will be down here in the corner. I didn't feel it was important to get this information on these sheets just yet, because I don't want to finalize everything until I've just decided that everything is set. Because if I decide all of a sudden, I want to add a stat or take away a stat or add more players or delete more players or whatever I decide to do, if I have all this stuff finalized on the sheet, then I can run into problems where things start overlapping. I don't have enough space, whatever the situation arises. So here's my lines. Line 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's my defensive pairs, my goalies. Here's my 20 players I would take in on a normal situation. And you can see here, in a normal situation, we're talking about there's 82 games in a regular season, right? So Alexander Ovechkin played 82 games. He was in every game they had. Nicklas Backstrom was in 82 games. He played every game they had. TJ Oshie only played 68 games, 82, 82, 82. Line two, they played every single game together. So you're not normally going to, have a situation where you got to bring in a backup. And in fact, you can see the backups for Washington Capitals. Left wing, 26 games for Stanford. Vernara played 21 games. Bailey played 3 games. Carey played 6. Stevenson played 4, and Garrett Mitchell played a whole 1 game. So, you're not going to be using these a lot of the times. Normally, you're going to be playing this and then probably have one player that might not maybe be there. Burakovsky only played 64 games. So, for 82 games, you need 18 games of the season where Burakovsky's not going to play, and you're probably going to be putting in one of your other left wings in there. Okay, so that's kind of, so I would have basically, I'm going to have in front of me, slide that over. I'm basically going to have, let's get out the other one. Let's see here. I've got this all messed up because of these icons now. Here we are. You can see we actually have another team here, the Toronto Maple Leafs from 2016-2017. Except for I'm zoomed way the frick in. Let's zoom way the frick out. And basically what I'm trying to show you here is I would have basically 2 printouts. I would have those sheets, 2, sheets of paper on my table, and that would represent all of my cards for all of my players. So I wouldn't need to flip. So what does this do for me? Advantages, disadvantages. Once again, complexity versus playability. You have to kind of decide how complex you want the game versus how playable is the game. I could just have, any sports sim, you could just roll the dice and go, oh, well, let's see. I rolled a 79 on the first play of the game, and it's a goal. And then I roll again. I rolled a 64, nothing happened. I rolled again, 23, nothing happened. I rolled again, So, you can make it as simple as you want. You can make it as complex as you want. More complex it is, the more time it's going to take to play the game. So I'm shooting for something that is remarkably complex, but yet as playable and as fast as it can be. That's my goal anyways. And even though I have lots of results and stats out there, we're going to look at these in just a second here. I'm trying to make it so that it plays as fast as possible. And yet it's not just, and as I talked about, it's still going to be, you're going to be simming every 20 seconds in a hockey game. So you're going to have 60 plays, which means I want each play result to happen very quickly. I want 2 dice rolls and a result done and move on. Boom, 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 boom. And I think, just by testing and trying things, the more you play, obviously, the faster it's going to go, but the more you understand some of the easy ways to get around the system. So, for example, one of the things you'll learn in my game, you can see here we have left wing center, right wing, left defenseman, right defenseman. They have these numbers after them. Well, what's all these numbers represent? Well, fortunately for us, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, there are 6 players out on the ice for each team, at a time, and that's, of course, there's a penalty. And of course, I'm assuming you know enough about hockey that when I talk about things, you'll understand. Um, and so you would think, oh, that's perfect for a six-sider. And not right, because your goalie hardly ever, unless we're talking about a shot on goal, has anything to do with a play that's going to happen. And the only time a goalie comes into play is really when, obviously, there's a shot on goal. So six-siders, I've tried. Trust me, I've tried, because six-siders obviously the most easiest way to do things. And it would be, I guess, quicker and easy for people for a six-sider. But fortunately for us, there are 5 offensive players and there's 5 defensive players out at the ice at any given time. Of course, unless there's a penalty, which brings into play 10-sided dice. So if I roll a 10-sided dice, I can figure out which player we're talking about quickly and easily. So if I roll the dice here, and we'll talk about this in a minute. If I roll a 4, you can quickly see that we're talking about the left defenseman here. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And in fact, it also goes offensive and defensive, which you will learn very quickly as well once you start playing the game. In that the players you're going to be looking for when we're talking about a check, when we roll for a skill check, 1 is going to be your left wing, offensive left wing. 2 is going to be your offensive center. 3 is going to be your offensive right wing. 4 is going to be your offensive left defenseman. 5 is going to be your offensive right defenseman. So 1 through 5 is going to be your offensive team based upon your 1 to 5 result on your position. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all the same thing, but they're the defensive players. So if I roll again, 4 is going to be your offensive left defenseman. 4 offensive left defenseman. 9 here is going to be your defensive left defenseman. 10 is going to be your defensive right defenseman. 3 is going to be your right wing for your offense. So 1 to 5, obviously, easy to remember. Offensive team. 6 to 10 is your defensive team. So when we were looking at a play, and we're going to talk about the dice here in a few minutes, but when I roll the 5 dice, I'm always going to be starting with the 10-sided dice. I'm sorry, of course we're going to be talking about 10-sided dice. We're always going to be starting, usually, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be looking at the red dice first, and that's going to give us a well, do I want to go into that yet? Do I want to talk about the different dice? I can't. All right. Yeah, I guess we will talk about the. Do we want to talk about that yet? I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to minimize this stuff out of the way. Sure. I guess we'll talk about first things first. So let's get my. So you can see here what I did was I basically just took the top part of those sheets and I just created like a little JPEG so I could bring those out and you can just see them. And it's the Toronto team, and of course we have the Washington team as well. The reason I chose Washington and Toronto was they played a first round playoff game together. Since I already had Washington done, or started working at Washington, I was like, well, which other team should I use? Well, the first round of the playoffs, Toronto played Washington in 2016, 2017. So I'm like, since I did Washington, I might as well do somebody they played in the playoffs. So that happened to be Toronto. So the first round of the playoffs was these 2 teams. So I would have my 2 printouts here. If I was playing at home, I'm a sports simmer. I got my 2 sheets. I've got them printed out. I have them on my table. I've got my dice over here on the side. Then, of course, we have our charts, right? But of course, our charts, so we're going to talk about our charts. Shall we talk about our charts? We're going to talk about our charts. All right. So obviously we have to have some kind of, well, let's talk about the dice first. So the dice, you can see there's a lot of dice here. You're like, wow. Well, the reason I have all these dice in here is because I'm not at home and I can't just, I'm trying to create a play and get a result and be done with it, and move on to the next roll. And sometimes I might need all these dice, sometimes I don't. But since I can't just grab 2 dice, or I can't just grab 1 dice, or I can't just grab 3 dice, a lot of times we'll need all 5 dice. But in some plays we might only need 1 dice or 2 dice or whatever. So I just, I'm just going to keep all 5 in there. Sometimes we'll use all of them, sometimes we won't, which we'll talk about. So let's talk about why and what. So the red dice, like I said, you normally start with the red dice. Think of the dice as a flow chart. The flow chart flows from the red dice to the next dice, to the next dice, to the next dice. But there is the black dice and the white dice. What do those represent? 9 times out of 10, or 99% of the time, I'm pretty sure almost 100% of the time, if you know anything about hockey, you know that there is the offensive team, and then we have the defensive team. So the black dice represents the offensive team, or in certain situations, the black dice represents the home team. And then the white dice represents the defensive team, or in some cases, when no one has possession of the puck. Specifically, we're talking about like face-offs. This represents the visiting team. If you know anything about hockey or don't know, I will explain. The home team always wears dark jerseys. That's why we have the black dice for the home team. The other team always wears their light jerseys, or in this case, the white jerseys. So if we don't know who has possession of the puck, and specifically we're talking about the only time we would use home and visitor is when we are dropping the puck for a face-off. Because at that point, there is no offensive team, there is no defensive team. So I can't say, well, this team is the offensive team and this is the defensive team. So in that situation, when we're dropping the puck for a face-off, this is the home team, this is the visitor team, right? And then the black dice always flows to the green dice. And the white dice always flows to the yellow dice. And even though, think of it as, again, like kind of a flow chart. You go from the red dice, you're going to either go to the black dice, or you're going to go to the white dice. If you go to the white dice, then you're going to flow to the yellow dice. If you go to the red dice, you flow to the black dice, you're going to flow to this. So sometimes, even though I rolled all those dice, you're not going to be using them all the time. Because on a normal situation, if we bring back up our hang on just a second. Let me get this so it's easier to explain here. We're just going to go ahead and grab this real quick. We're just going to call it 1. That's fine. All right, you're going to be using this chart all the time. All the time, because we're going to be basically setting up a matchup, and we're going to find out the result of the play, whether the player passes or fails, which means we need to actually talk about the player cards. Because there's a lot of data on these player cards, and you're all looking at them going, what the frickety frick is that, right? So let's just look at Toronto here. We'll look at Austin Matthews, right? He's got all these different stats on his card. What do those represent? Good question. Good question. That is a real good question. So we're going to bring up the player outline so you can see what the player outline looks like. So of course at the top you have the position of the player, left wing, position die number. You would see a 1 and a 6 here, but I created this before I actually added the 6 because I didn't want to confuse people, but then I thought it would probably be easier to put both numbers on this die because it would be easier. So just ignore that, the fact that the 6 isn't there. Name of the player. Then, of course, you have your games he played, you have your goals he scored, your assists, and the total points. So that's your outside. That's pretty easy information. Let's get to the inside. This is a little more complex, obviously. So when we're deciding what we're doing in these 20 seconds of time that happen on a play, we're going to find out who we're going to be testing and what we're going to be testing. So there is the offense. All these numbers are going to be based from 1 to 10. And this is kind of a bad example because I've changed some stats already on this. And yeah, I should probably change that real quick because it's going to confuse people if I don't. And I don't want people to be confused because this is not confusing. All right, let me bring back up Alexander Ovechkin here, and I need to copy him. And we're actually going to remove that, and then we're going to paste it, the new one, back in there. There we go. I don't want people to be confused. And then we're going to send it to the back. Send it back. There we go. All right. That's a little bit better. That's what I wanted to see. Okay, good. Let's save that so I don't screw things up. All right. So when we're talking about getting a result of a play, we're going to roll. And of course, first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the dice. And in this case, if it rolls the red dice, we're going to look at the red dice, player number 1. If we go back to our chart here, player number 1 is going to be your left wing. So in this case, it's going to be Alexander Ovechkin. And we're going to be testing Alexander Ovechkin. We're going to find out whether Alexander Ovechkin makes the play or not. Does he make the play? And that's where we look at his stats. He's got an offensive stat. And these stats are based upon 1 to 10 dice, 1 to D10. And the stats are actually go from 3, which is very poor, up to 7, which is excellent. So 3 to 7 on a 10-sided dice are the stats. So you got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So everybody's going to have a rating between 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. 5 is average. 6 above average, 7 is excellent, 4 is below average, and 3 is poor. So you can quickly, now that you know this, you can look at a player and go, he's got a lot of high numbers, 7, 7, 7, 7. He's got average, a 6. He's got some other numbers in there. So this guy looks pretty decent. You compare him to, say, let's look at one of the scrubs here. Nothing against Paul Carey, but he's kind of a scrub, I guess. Paste that in there. We can look at Paul Carey here. Bring him down. Again, nothing against Paul Carey. I'm sure he's a fine fellow. Everyone loves Paul Carey. But you can see his stats. 3, 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 7, 2, 3, 3, 3. Lots of 3s, which are the lowest. Ugh. 1, 7, which is the best. Average is 5. So anything below 5, average, average, below average, way below average. So you can see big difference between Alexander Ovechkin and Paul Carey. So you can just see that. You know that. Now that you know that information, you can look at the player card and you can say, oh, this guy, yeah, he goes from 3 to 7. That's pretty decent, right? It's pretty decent. He's got a lot of high stats. Very good. So what are these stats? So we got offensive, we have passing, we have skating, we have defensive, we have hitting, we have takeaway. Those 6 stats will be the 6 stats that we will always be testing on a player on a normal play result. On a normal play result. On a normal play result. Okay, people? So offensively, it's either going to be offense. Offense represents the player's ability to generate offense, to be in position, to know where his fellow teammates are. I mean, there's a lot that goes into passing or offense. Passing, you should know what passing is, his ability to find an open man and get him the puck. Skating, his ability to skate down the ice, deke around defensemen, quickly get to the puck. There's a lot that goes into each one of these stats. Offense, passing, it's not just can I slide the puck across the ice. This is going to be, can I find an open man? Can I hit a man that's streaking down the line? While I'm flying down the line, can I just do a drop pass to the defenseman that's coming in behind me? So, I mean, passing takes a lot. It's not just throw it from one side of the ice to the other. Same thing with skating. It's not just going from point A to point B. We're talking about getting around defenders. When they're hooking you and they're grabbing you, are you able to break off those checks to get, keep going? How fast are you? How quick can you stop? So skating takes in a lot of different ratings. Instead of having 12 different offensive ratings or 10 different offensive ratings, I broke it down into just 3 ratings. Again, complexity versus playability. If I had 12 different stats on this, obviously we're talking about not being able to put all these players on one sheet of paper. If I have, if I've got 5 lines worth of stats that I want to keep track of for each player, I'm not going to be able to do that. All right, so the plays we're going to be testing, if Alexander Ovechkin's team has the puck, he's an offensive player, we're going to be using an offensive stat, which are these 3 here on the top. If Alexander Ovechkin is asked and his team does not have the puck, he's defensively doing it, so we're going to be looking at his defensive stats. So you can see offense if they're on the offensive side, defense if they're on the defensive side. Again, that's going to be based upon the red-sided dice. So in this case, just to give you a boop, here's our little puck. Yay! We're going to say, I can't actually do that. All right. For giggles here, we're going to say Toronto has the puck. Both teams have their number 1 line, number 1 defensive pairs out there. Okay? Right? So Toronto has the puck. And we're going for a play here. Boom, 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 boom. We're just going to roll the dice really quickly. First thing we're going to do is look at the red-sided dice. That's going to be left wing for offense. So we're going to be looking at James Van Riemsdyk. We know that. So we're just going to look at the Toronto card, look at line 1, look at the left defenseman. And we're going to be looking at either his offensive stat, his passing stat, or his skill stat. So how do we determine that? Well, again, flow chart, people, flow chart. We go there. We go to the offensive team and his dice. The offensive team is black. The black dice offense. If we would have rolled, say, can I pick this up and roll it again? If I would have, come on, pick up. Could I roll you again? Come on, roll. Roll, 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 roll. We'll just re-roll it. Let's see if we can get a high number here. That's not a high number. Let's get a defensive pair. That's a 4 again. Let's get a defensive player. That's, oh my God. Oh, there's a 6. All right, so 6. I'm going to arrange these dice so it makes sense, right? So there we go. So if we rolled a 6, in this case, it's a 6. It looks like a 9, but it is actually a 6. We're talking about the left wing for the team without the puck, 6 through 10, right? And that's Ovechkin. And we're going to be looking at the white dice. And the white dice, or the team dice, I like to call these the team dice because these are the team dice. This is the offensive team, this is the defensive team. And this will show us what we're actually going to be testing. In this case, it's a 0, that's takeaway. So Alexander Ovechkin is going to be looking at his takeaway. That's a 5. He rolled an 8. So this is a result dice. This is also a result dice. So it goes to Alexander Ovechkin. He is going to be taking his takeaway ability, and he rolled an 8. He has a 5. He failed his test. So we're going to the failed chart. We're going to look at these charts here in a little bit, but I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. But I'm kind of giving you the flow of what's happening here so you can kind of see. You have this chart, but you can see how easy it is that if I didn't have this chart, I didn't need to look it up. Now, I'm going to keep this chart out here because, let's just do another one real quick. Flowchart, people, that's a 1. That's the left wing. So we're going to look at the offensive dice. That is a 10. We know that is going to be skating. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Skating, he's a 5. He rolled a 10. He has failed his check. Alexander Ovechkin. I'm sorry, this is James Van Riemsdyk. Offensive team here. James Van Riemsdyk. He has a skating ability of 5. He rolled a 10. And he has failed his check. Now, people out there, you can see, wow, you say to yourself, is that really that easy? Are you going to be able to do that really quickly? I think you will. I think you will after you do it a couple times. Now, the other thing to help you out is we talked about each stat, it goes from 3, which is the worst you can be. 3 is the worst. Ignore this. That's a typo. It should not be a 2. But everything else will be from 3 to 7. 3 to 7 on everything else except for the goalie. Ignore the goalie because we haven't even talked about them yet. So that means anytime I'm checking a dice and it's a 1 or 2, I know I don't even need to look. I know that player automatically passed. He automatically passed. 1, 2, there's nothing. Again, ignore that F2. That should not be there. That must be a typo. When they're typing things up and going through stats, can't say everything's 100% perfect just yet. I was actually doing this at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to get Toronto done so I could bring this to you guys today. Okay, so I know if I'm looking at a result dice, that's what the yellow and the green dice are usually the result dice, right? Yellow goes with the defensive team. Green goes with the offensive team. We rolled an offensive team number, and we know it was player number. Well, that actually rolled on us. It was that's player number 1, which is your left wing. We're just in 10, which is your skating ability. And obviously, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can see if it's a 1 through 4, you're going to be using either the offensive or defense. It's a 5, 6, 7, you're going to use in passing and hitting. 8, 9, 10, skating or takeaway, whether you're checking the offensive, defensive stats. All right, we haven't talked about the other stats yet. We'll get to those. I'm trying to go through this complexity and make you understand more than just the numbers or the stats. I'm trying to get you to understand what I'm going for and what I'm trying to do and how my thought process behind that and how I making this as easy for anyone as possible, because you'll quickly go, when you start rolling the red dice and you go, oh, we got to look up position number 8. Well, we know that's going to be the defensive right wing. And if a roll of 5, that's going to be the the offensive right defenseman. And you're going to know these numbers after about the 20th time, and you're going to not need this chart anymore because it's always, 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 always going to be the same. This is always, always, always going to be the same. So you can quickly go through. And if I know, I'm going to look at the offensive guy, and I quickly just look at his result, and I go, it's a 1, 2, he passed. It's a 8, 9, or 10, he failed. I don't even care what this dice is because I know he either passed or failed his check by looking at this dice. So half the time, he's either going to auto pass or he's going to auto fail, and that's just the nature of hockey. It's just it's just the nature of hockey. Sometimes you're going to make the play, sometimes you're not going to make the play, and sometimes we need to check and see how good you are to find out if you make the play. If I had stats ranging from 1 to 10 on here, besides, having, let's take Alexander Ovechkin here, okay? If I had Alexander Ovechkin and I had him, oh well, he's like the best offensive player in the league. He scored well. He's not actually. He only scored actually 33 goals. Austin Matthews, actually, the rookie, scored 40 goals. So he scored more goals than Alexander Ovechkin. But if I say Austin Matthews, wow, he's really good. He's really good. He's a 9 offense. Is he ever going to fail a test? Hardly ever. Is that fair to the defenders? No, it's not. Because I don't care how good you are. You're not going to always pass, and you're not going to always fail. There's just hockey isn't like that. Unlike, say, let's take football, for example. I don't care. You take the worst quarterback out there, backup quarterback has to come in the game, blah, blah, blah. You can't just go, oh my God, he has got a 1 rating, 1 out of 10. He's never going to complete a pass. Well, if he's never going to complete a pass, you're telling me he can never complete a pass? Ever? Ever? Guy's wide open. He lobs it to him, right into his chest. He's never going to complete that pass. So you're always going to have, my opinion, you should never always have it where it's automatically where a player can't do something or can do something because their ratings are too high or too low. So that's why all the ratings go from 3 to 7. 5 is in the middle, which means if I roll a 10-sided dice, 1 to 5, I pass. 6 to 10, I fail. So if I have a 5 rating, that means half the time I'm going to succeed, half the time I'm going to fail. So I've been rambling on for about an hour here. We've still got a ton of stuff to talk about. We haven't talked about the other stats. We haven't talked about the goalie. We haven't talked about the play results, which are obviously going to be just as important. But I'm going to break this up into another video where we're going to continue this look at matchup hockey. And, of course, love to get your thoughts and opinions on it, guys, if you have anything. But be sure to check out video number 2. We're going to talk more about, okay, once we find out if a player passes or fails, then what? And we're going to find out about goalies. We're going to find out about play results. And we're going to, maybe do a couple practice plays just to show you how things flow. And hopefully you're enjoying this. So we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. And look out for video number 2 to come shortly. Thanks.